Okay, you guys ready to get started? So today we are looking at Module 10. Today is all about security. So in Module 10 we will introduce ourselves to it. I'd encourage you to put this in full screen just because there are a couple animations that you'll miss if you don't. Alright, everyone good to go? So, what is security and why do we need it anyways? A roadmap for today is we'll start off with a general introduction, look at a couple different techniques in security, then we'll get into encryption. And for the encryption part, that's sort of the backbone of the web, and of the web in the modern era where everything needs to be secure. Then we'll look at code injection, that is, how do we get our code to run somewhere it's not supposed to run, and finally reverse engineering and Trojan horses. So that's altering programs that you're not supposed to alter. So yeah, I've given you all of the presentations for essentially the entire course in the shared folder now, and there's a bunch more in the shared folder that we'll be using today for some of these exercises. The other thing is, today at lunch we do have our lunchtime activity. This is on physical security, so very much related to this, except instead of breaking in through software, we're going to look at how to keep people from breaking in real life. So what is computer security? Anyone have any ideas? Yes, fellow.
It's like preventing access from outside to the data or the thing we have in our computers, or preventing the change of those files.
Excellent, yeah, so preventing access from outside, right? Sarah, you had something?
No, that covered it.
Okay, awesome. Any other ideas? Yeah. So it's preventing users from doing unauthorized things. I say this because sometimes we want to let a user in and read the data, but maybe not write to it, right? So we want to control users, what they can do. So if we want to prevent users from doing unauthorized things, and say our unauthorized thing is reading the data on this hard drive, right? So there's a hard drive in here, it's got very important data in it. Would it be good security to take the hard drive out of the server, unplug it from everything, stick it in a locked safe, stick that in a nuclear doomsday bunker, throw that in the bottom of the ocean on the Jovian moon Callisto? Is that good security? It would work, right? It would prevent users from getting to the data. What's the problem with that? Yeah. I know this, Francois. Yes. Yeah, so we can't get it physically. That hard drive may as well not be there, right? So another important aspect of security is allowing the authorized users to do what they're authorized to do, right? So it's always a fine line trying to allow who's allowed and disallow who is not. And it's a perpetual cat and mouse game. Attackers try to access the systems, and security experts try to thwart this. Anyone watch Tom and Jerry when you were little? Or now? Anyone do it now? Right? So you know how Jerry is always coming up with his knavish tricks to evade Tom. So we're sort of going to be looking at knavish tricks both from the point of view of the attacker and from the point of view of the security consultant. Notice that I used the word attacker. There's a reason for that. You might have heard the term hacking. Hacking is, in general, not just breaking into computers, which is what most people hear of. It's used for all sorts of things other than that, and in general, it sort of means using things for what they're not meant to be used for, which isn't always a bad thing. So you might hear of life hacks, right? Anyone seen something like this? Right, that's what people call a life hack. There's roof and tunnel hacking, very famous at MIT. Students go on the roofs and tunnels of campus. It's not allowed, but that's what they call it, is hacking. And electronics hacking, right? People taking apart electronics and rewiring them to do something they're not supposed to, right? So like using the RC mechanism of an RC car to do something totally different. It's a difficult thing to do, but it's not just limited to computers. Okay, so in security in general, and especially in computer security, vulnerabilities are everywhere, right? So we learned about the hardware. That hardware just executes its code. It does not care if that's done by an authorized user. So that means we have to write the software very carefully to prevent that from happening. We've learned a lot of different technologies in this course. Oh. You guys getting that as well? It must be some kind of ECF updating thing. You can go ahead and click run. Right? Okay, what is this? Who's getting this? Put your hand up if you got it. Couple of you, the rest are probably not following along. Or, okay, so what this is a little program called Malicious Melvin. How did Malicious Melvin start? Did we run Malicious Melvin? No. Any ideas how he started? Judith? Were we hacked? A little bit. Don't know if I'd call it hacking, but a little bit. Yes, Velo?
There was a program embedded to this PowerPoint, and it also asked for a confirmation.
Yeah. Yeah, so he said there's a program embedded into the PowerPoint and also asks the confirmation. Nicholas, is that what you were going to say? Yeah. Right? So we can go ahead and click through Malicious Melvin. He'll go ahead and threaten to do a bunch of malicious stuff, but he won't actually do it. Yeah. All right. For those of you who got Malicious Melvin up, are you done clicking through him? So yeah, as Velo was pointing out, there is an executable embedded in this PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to open that up and go back to that slide. And you'll notice, beside the slide, there's this little, there's this little melvin.exe right here. That is an embedded object in the PowerPoint file. Melvin.exe was not signed, means it was from an untrusted source. That's why PowerPoint asked us for confirmation. An unsuspecting user might not know what that meant, right? So I told you guys to click run so that you would. An unsuspecting user might do it on his own. That's a dangerous thing. So PowerPoint files, and in general, most types of document files of a sufficiently advanced nature can have embedded executable code in them. So security vulnerabilities come from anywhere, right? You could have downloaded this from the web thinking it was an innocuous presentation and suddenly got your entire hard drive wiped. Any questions on that? Right? Luckily, Melvin did not wipe your hard drive, but he could have. So, what do you think I mean with this castle image here? Velo, I've heard from you before. Yeah, I'm hearing Fortress. Who called that out? Yeah. So, Fortress, what does that mean in terms of computer security? Pardon? So big walls trying to make good security. Yeah, so this is sort of a fortress. It's trying to keep people out. And the thing I want you to get from that is look at all those windows, right? Look at that door. There are a bunch of doors on the side. Look at that moat. Yeah, so we have this fortress. It's got all kinds of ways in. We have to secure all of them. So that's sort of the analogy I want you to get. With computers as well, we have all kinds of ways in, and we have to worry about all of them if we want to make a secure program. So let's go back to our original definition of security. It is preventing users from doing unauthorized things and allowing those who are authorized to do those things. So some important concepts in this is authentication. Who is who? Can we prove who actually is an authorized user? Right? So Windows passwords do that. We enter a password to show that we're the person with access to that account. Then there's access control, determining who can use the system. Right? So once we've determined who is actually who, does that person have permission to access the system? Authorization, and that is what can that person do once he's inside the system? Right? So you know how Windows has admin accounts and normal accounts? That's an example of authorization levels. Use auditing, and that stops a legitimate user from abusing the power. Right? So if we go ahead on Cynet and try to use the login nodes to run a whole bunch of heavy code and avoid that queue, Cynet's going to complain to us and say, hey, you can't do that. You're overusing the resources of the login nodes. Then there's data integrity. How would we be sure trusted data has not been altered? So if we send, say, an HTTP packet from one part of the world to another, any switch along the way can change the data of that packet. And we might still think that it's the same data that originated from where we sent for, right? So we have to implement measures of data integrity to prevent that from happening. And finally, there's availability. We want to make sure that any system we write is always available when it needs to be, and that an attacker can't just take the system down without actually accessing it. Any questions on these? So let's look at a couple ways our attackers can break our system. Okay, so breaking in. Accessing a system he plain doesn't have access to. Which one of these security measures corresponds to that and would prevent someone from breaking in? Any ideas? Sarah?
Authentication and access control?
Yeah, so which one would it probably be? Right, in terms of authentication and access control. So even if, do we know who the attacker is?
No.
We could, right? The point is the attacker doesn't have access to the system, so it's actually access control. So then there's elevation of privileges, doing something that the user should not be able to do. So if you go and do admin stuff on Windows, that's an elevation of privileges you're not supposed to do. Judith, do you have a question? Okay. Yeah, so we have elevation of privileges. Which one of these corresponds to that? Pardon?
Authorization?
Yeah, authorization. Sarah? Denial of service, bringing down a system. Don't even need to access it to do this. Which one corresponds to that? Yes. Availability, good. Oops. Ah, okay, I just showed that accidentally. But yeah, so abuse is use auditing, right? We can prevent someone from abusing the powers of a system. Then there's cracking, making a system do something it was not supposed to. This one's a bit of a tricky question. Nicholas. Pardon? Integrity? Okay. Is that actually changing data? No. Yeah, so integrity is changing data that we expect to be something else, right? So that wouldn't be integrity. And it doesn't really sound like authentication either, does it? Right? So it's probably one of these ones we've already used. Velo? No? Right? Any ideas for cracking into a system? Yes. Pardon? So use auditing, why would it be use auditing? Okay, so that's a good thought. In this case, it could be use auditing. In fact, I think it might be. Oh, no, it's authorization. Yeah, it could be either, depending on which you do. Right, so cracking could be this if you're an authorized user, and it could be going above your authorization level. So that's still a good answer. Give you a different one this time. And finally, spoofing, claiming to be someone that a user is not. Yes, Edwin. Yeah. Think fast. Right? So these are a couple of the ways an attacker can break a system and the ways we thwart it. Why is integrity just hanging around here on its own? The reason for that is integrity tends to be a part that overarches the entire system, right? So for access control, if we can change the data and make the system think it's a different user, then we can pretend to be a user that has access when we don't. Same with authentication, we can change the data and make the system think that we are someone we're not, and just about everything in between. So integrity is kind of a way we use to counteract all of these. Any questions on that? So we have a lot to worry about, right? We've got all of these ways that someone can break into our castle. And Melvin's not going to bother us this time. and we'll use today to learn how to do all this. So we have a bunch of different wares, right? You've heard of probably hardware, software, adware, malware. We'll get into that, cookware, because that was where the ware came from originally, and other common wares, and wetware. We covered wetware at lunch yesterday. Anyone remember what it means? Nicholas? Yeah, so wetware is the human brain. So it is by far the biggest threat to high security applications because we can get someone on the inside to give us access that that person has, and it's a lot easier to convince a person to go against the rules than to convince a computer to go against the rules, because all the computer knows is the rules. So has anyone ever heard of or got a call from someone claiming to be Microsoft support? Something similar, yes? Anyone had any similar experiences? No? Right, yes.
I was like watching a website and then it shows up as the Canadian Mounted Police. They asked me to give a fine.
Oh wow, okay, so that's a different one. Someone pretending to be the Canadian Mounted Police and asking for money, right? There are all kinds of ways that people can do it. Edwin? Pardon? Oh, cookware is like what you cook things in. So like, pots and pans. Yeah, I just stuck that in there because it has nothing to do with computers or computer security, but the ware is sort of the common suffix there, right? So we derived all of this when computers came out from words like cookware. Yeah, you can probably use cookware to do a denial of service attack, just, right? Yeah, so we looked at a couple different things that people have been tried to be taken for. The RCMP and people pretending to be from Microsoft. Normally when they do that, they say, there's a virus on your computer and we can fix it for you. Then they ask for sometimes your username and password, sometimes your credit card information, all kinds of nasty stuff. And a lot of people fall for that because they think it's legitimate. For those who were here yesterday at lunch, they were using that authority method of persuasion. They pretended to be someone in an authoritative position. Oftentimes they also use the consistency one. They ask for something smaller first, like, hey, can you check this on your computer? Then that person's already on his computer, already cooperating with the person on the phone. When they ask for the password, it seems like a lot less of a request. And people fall for that. So we're going to learn first how they do that, specifically phishing, and then we can learn how to protect against it ourselves. So, we're going to go ahead and phish Facebook. Anyone know what phishing is? Yes.